Is it true you believe you live with a ghost?
Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? Something so strange, so extraordinary that, by all logic, it should have been impossible?
I've definitely witnessed things that I cannot for the life of me explain.
I said, sweetheart, there's nobody there. She said, there is, Daddy. There's a man that's right behind you.
I couldn't get an explanation out of it.
There's a word for things that fall outside what we can understand through reason or science: the paranormal. It's thought to include things like ghosts, extrasensory perception, and communicating with the dead. But even in our hyper-scientific world, obsessed with technology and rationality, deep below the surface is an irresistible draw to the supernatural. The psychologist Carl Jung once wrote that the fear of ghosts is still deep in our bones, but it's unconscious. It's a psychological rule that the brighter the light, the blacker the shadow. In other words, the more rationalistic we are in our conscious minds, the more alive becomes the spectral world of the unconscious. It explains why films and shows about the supernatural have always been so popular, and continue to be. But is there something more to it? The prominent Jungian scholar Dr. Roderick Mayne points out that Jung had many paranormal experiences throughout his life that deeply affected him, and it's precisely these experiences that led to him developing his theory of synchronicity. Synchronicity in the world of the paranormal lies at the heart of the film Hereafter, a story of three people who've been touched by tremendous loss in different ways. At first glance, they seem like random people in different countries with little to connect them. But as their story unfolds, a series of choices and chance events brings them face to face with an inexplicable mystery, hinting at powerful and unseen forces that connect us all. And there will be spoilers ahead. This is George Lonigan. He lives a modest life in San Francisco, where he works at a factory. With no friends and no romantic relationship, the only family he has is his brother Billy. He spends most nights eating alone and listening to audiobooks from his favorite author, Charles Dickens. But there's something about George that very few people know. He can speak to the dead, bringing back messages from souls who've crossed over into the afterlife. We see it in a scene where his brother tries to convince George to do a reading for one of his clients. "I told you I don't do readings anymore." "Just one time," Billy says. "He's a really important client. I need this." "Okay, but this is it." The client's name is Andreas Christos. He has the look of a man tired with the pain of loss. George takes his hands and, in an instant, he channels a divine world filled with light. He sees a mysterious figure. A woman close to you has passed. In her middle age, she was in her 50s. It was your wife. She was sick for a long time. She had a hard time moving. Bedridden. Andreas confirms it's all true. His wife had multiple sclerosis for years before she died. She wants to apologize to you for ruining your marriage. "That's not true," Andreas says. "She feels bad that you had to care for her, even as a young man. She wishes you would find someone new before it's too late, because you're not getting any younger or slimmer." She's got a great sense of humor. "Okay, she's giving me a date. June. Does that mean anything to you? Was it when you were married? Or was it when she passed? No. She's being very specific about June. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't done this in years. I guess I'm rusty." Billy walks with Andreas back to his car. But it's here that we learn that June wasn't a date. June is the name of a person. She's the nurse who took care of his wife for 15 years, right up until the moment she died. Andreas fell in love with June, but he felt so guilty he never told anyone. Not his wife, not June, not a single soul. There's no way anyone could have known. And yet here it was, an unmistakable message from his wife with her same sense of humor, telling him to stop grieving and to start living. "I was skeptical before I came here, but your brother is for real." George is what's called a medium, someone who can bring back messages from the afterlife, acting as a channel between the world of the living and the world of spirit. The idea of speaking to the souls of the dead has an ancient history, found in virtually every culture in the world. It was especially popular in Carl Jung's time, during the spiritualism movement in the mid-1800s. Jung had a lifelong fascination with the paranormal. His grandfather Samuel Pricework believed he was surrounded by spirits, and for one day every week, he would speak to the soul of his first wife, who died. Jung's mother and grandmother also reported seeing ghosts and other strange occurrences. Jung would go to seances where people would gather to connect with the spirits of the dead and hear messages from a medium. In his essay on spiritualistic phenomena, published in 1905, he wrote that, "I kept track of persons who are gifted as mediums. In the last few years, I've investigated 8 mediums, 6 of them women and 2 of them men. The results are of purely psychological interest." In fact, a number of mediums in the spiritualist movement were exposed as frauds, using trickery to dupe their victims. Knowing this, Jung was skeptical, and around the year 1919, he took the opinion that all spirits could be explained through psychology as expressions of the unconscious mind, writing that, "In all this I see no proof whatever of the existence of real spirits, and until such proof is forthcoming, I must regard this whole territory as an appendix of psychology." But decades later, Jung would seem to change his mind after having his own paranormal experiences, which he found impossible to explain using traditional models of science and psychology. In a footnote, he wrote that, "After collecting psychological experiences from many people in many countries for 50 years, I no longer feel as certain as I did in 1919 when I wrote this sentence. To put it bluntly, I doubt whether an exclusively psychological approach can do justice to the phenomena in question." In other words, he seemed to believe in the possibility that spirits were real. In his book Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung talks of a dream he had where he saw a figure of a woman who looked just like his wife laying in a deep pit surrounded with stone walls. It was a grave. Suddenly she gave a deep sigh, as if she died and had just given her last breath. And then her spirit began to float upwards. Jung woke up next to his wife and they checked the time. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. A few hours later, news came that his wife's cousin died at exactly 3 o'clock that same morning, precisely when Jung woke up from his dream. Was it a coincidence? There's another incident where Jung went to bed in a hotel room. At about 2 in the morning, he had a sudden feeling that someone had come into his room. He switched on the light, but there was nothing. Odd, I could have swore someone was in here. When he tried to remember what happened, he realized that he was having a strange headache. He says that it was as if something had struck my forehead and then the back of my skull. The next day, Jung received a telegram that one of his former patients had taken his own life. The man had used a gun, and the bullet came to rest in the back wall of the patient's skull. Over the years, Jung would have many strange experiences. He seemed to have an unusual sensitivity for the paranormal, but was it a blessing or a burden? For George, he didn't see his ability to speak to the dead as a gift. He saw it as a curse that ruined any chance he had at living a normal life. It also made romantic relationships impossible. His visions would scare people away. It turns out that many years ago, there was a time when George did offer readings to as many people as he could, but the work overwhelmed him. Being a medium meant bringing people comfort, but it also meant being constantly surrounded by pain and grief. In the end, he decided to quit, to leave his old life behind, and hide every trace of his abilities. A life all about death is no life at all, George says. George tells his brother he's much happier now, but we can see the truth. His life isn't going anywhere. It's like he's waiting for something. How long can he keep running from who he is? Little does he know, his world is about to completely change. This is Marie Lallet. She's a journalist who works in television at the national public broadcaster in France. High-powered and successful, she handles some of the most high-profile stories at the station. One day, she takes a vacation with her boyfriend to Indonesia. She visits a local market to buy some souvenirs. Suddenly, a huge wave starts to form in the distance, growing larger as it approaches, crushing everything in its path. For Marie and hundreds of people around her, by the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. They're caught in a horrifying tsunami. Overwhelmed by the rushing water, Marie is hit by a piece of debris. And as the current pulls her further away, she begins to drift, into unconsciousness. In an instant, she finds herself in a world filled with an impossibly bright light, hundreds of souls all moving around her as she glides above them. Voices call out to her as if inviting her to come along. Just then, 2 men pull her from the water, trying to bring her back to life. "I think she's gone," the man says. Marie shouldn't have survived, but suddenly she's pulled out of the world of the spirit and back into the world of the living. She had a near-death experience. For those who have them, they see powerful and amazingly detailed visions that change them forever. They're some of the most compelling pieces of evidence we have for the possibility of life after death, and we see them reported across different cultures and religions. Even atheists report having them. And their experiences are remarkably similar, describing things like floating outside their bodies, being outside of time, seeing their lives flash before their eyes, and meeting celestial beings in indescribably beautiful colors and places, overwhelming them with a sense of joy and unconditional love. Carl Jung also had a near-death experience, which we looked at in this video. In his book Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung writes about being hospitalized in 1944 after having a heart attack. He suddenly found himself floating in outer space, seeing a spectacular view of the earth below him. It's impossible to convey the beauty and intensity of emotions during those visions. They were the most tremendous things I've ever experienced. It was not a product of imagination. They were utterly real. There was nothing subjective about them. They all had a quality of absolute objectivity. When Jung returned to his body back in his hospital bed, he says, "I was profoundly disappointed. A good 3 weeks were still to pass before I could truly make up my mind to live again." This is common for many people who have near-death experiences. In much the same way, Marie also struggles to readjust to her normal life. At her job, she finds herself distracted, unable to focus on her work. When she tries to explain the incredible vision she saw to her boyfriend, he dismisses her. "Marie, you hit your head. You had a concussion." But even still, she spends more and more time researching what happened to her, to understand the profound vision she saw in the waves that almost took her life. She decides to write a new book on near-death experiences. This powerful change in perspective is common among those who come back from the brink of dying. Jung wrote that after his own near-death experience, "A fruitful period of work began for me. A good many of my principal works were written only then. The insight I had gave me the courage to undertake new formulations. I no longer attempted to put forward my own opinion, but surrendered myself to the current of my thoughts. Thus, one problem after another revealed itself to me and took shape." But for Marie, her dramatic change isn't without consequences. Her coworkers become alarmed that she's become obsessed with the afterlife. They're afraid she's lost all credibility as a journalist. Soon afterwards, she loses her job. As her life unravels, her boyfriend becomes more and more distant, until their relationship falls apart. "A few months ago, I was famous and rich, a success story. I was happy and fulfilled by my work. What she doesn't realize is that she has to leave her old life behind, and her life is about to be completely transformed." This is Marcus, a 12-year-old boy who lives with his twin brother Jason and his mother in London. Jason is older than Marcus by only 12 minutes, but their personalities are quite different. While Marcus is quiet and withdrawn, Jason is a natural leader who has always taken on the older brother role. Jason does most of the talking for both of them. We learn that their mother has an addiction problem. 2 social workers come to visit them to decide if their mother is fit to have custody of the boys by herself. But she struggles to wake up in time for the meeting. She's hungover, and it's here that she decides to turn her life around. She asks Jason to pick up a prescription for detox medicine so she can get sober. As he does that, a group of older boys surround him, trying to bully him into handing over his cell phone. One of them takes it. Jason snatches it back. But as he tries to get away, the unthinkable happens. It's a horrifying scene. Marcus knows at this moment that nothing will ever be the same. His brother is gone. His mother will go into rehab, and he'll be put into foster care. With no family and no friends, he becomes even more withdrawn. He barely speaks to anyone. and wherever he goes, he wears Jason's old hat. Every night, he sets it down on the empty bed beside him and tells his brother, "Good night, Jace." With no one to talk to, he goes online, looking for answers about death and the afterlife. There's no shortage of people who claim to speak to the dead. Marcus visits as many as he can, and one by one, they're all revealed to be fakes. Frauds, charlatans. Growing more discouraged by the day, and at the lowest point in his life, he stumbles onto George's old website, The Man Who Genuinely Talks to the Dead. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, George is laid off from his factory job. They offer him a package for 6 months' pay, and he takes it. With no job, George finds himself at a new low point. Does he go back to giving readings even though it made him miserable? Or is this his chance to finally live life on his own terms? And in France, Marie finally finishes her book, giving it the title, The Afterlife, A Conspiracy of Silence. But when a major publisher rejects it, she begins to wonder if she made a terrible mistake when she walked away from a successful career. All three of them are at a standstill. They're stuck with no clear way to move forward. Sooner or later, we all find ourselves in low points like this one. But for me, I found that one of the best ways to come out of it is to open yourself up to the unexpected. And when you're ready, this is what you need to look for. Synchronicity. Jung describes it as a meaningful coincidence that happens when an inner state of the mind lines up with an event in the outside world. They're not connected by cause and effect. What connects them is meaning, and what sets them apart is a sense of the numinous, an overwhelming feeling of wonder and awe, an experience of the divine that lifts you outside of yourself, hinting at the possibility that each of us is connected in a single unified reality from which everything derives. Jung called it unus mundus, which is Latin for one world. He pointed out that synchronicities often happen at very emotional points in our lives. They call on us to live in the moment, taking us out of our daily routine and urging us towards what he called individuation, the process by which we become who we really are, a journey towards wholeness where we integrate every part of our being. One of the best examples comes from one of Jung's patients, a well-educated woman who was unable to see beyond her rationalism. It made her very resistant to Jung's treatments. But one night, she had a dream where she was given a golden scarab beetle. At exactly the moment she told Jung about this dream, a beetle flew into the room with them. They were both utterly astonished. For the ancient Egyptians, the scarab was a symbol of rebirth, of resurrection and renewal. And this powerful experience opened her mind to new possibilities and ways of being. Meaningful coincidences are what push us forward, so we can finally move past the things that have blocked us for so long. Each of our characters finds themselves at a similar turning point, and all of it culminates in a beautiful synchronicity that lies at the heart of this film. There's a scene where Marcus walks into a subway station. He steps onto the platform, and just before he gets on the train, his hat is mysteriously blown off his head. He rushes to pick it up through the crowds of people, but by the time he does, the train's already leaving. And just as it heads into the tunnel, everyone scatters amid the chaos, leaving the entire city shaken. In the aftermath, his new foster parents decide to introduce him to one of their past foster children, a boy they raised until he moved out after turning 18. His name is Ricky, and he now works as a security guard at the Alexandra Palace building in London. Maybe talking to another foster child could help Marcus come out of his shell. Meanwhile, Marie gets a surprise call from another publisher saying that they loved her book. They offer to publish it, but they would need her to fly to London to promote it at a book fair. It's very short notice. Can she do it? And after losing his job, George decides to do something he's always wanted to do. Go to London, where he can see the Charles Dickens Museum, the very house that Dickens lived in from 1837 to 1839 when he wrote Oliver Twist. It's one of the first scenes where we see George genuinely happy, soaking in all the details of his favorite author. But just as the tour ends, he notices a poster for a book reading by the very same narrator of the audiobook he's been listening to every night. If he wants to make it, he'll have to get there right away. It also happens to be held at a book fair at Alexandra Palace. He gets there, and As he wanders through the fair, he overhears a voice. I felt connected to another world, a place of utter peace and tranquility. It's Marie, and she's reading an excerpt from her book. George is absolutely captivated by her story. As he waits in line to meet Marie and buy her book, their eyes meet, their hands touch, and in an instant, he sees the same glimpse of the spirit world Marie saw while she was underwater. He experiences it all as if he was living it himself, with all the emotions she felt in that other world. Without words, they share a moment of unmistakable connection. Did she feel it too? Wait a minute, I recognize you. You're that psychic. It's Marcus who recognizes George from his website, but George denies it. Look, what do you want? If it's a reading, I don't do it anymore, so leave me alone. He tries to leave, but Marcus follows him all the way back to his hotel room. Hours pass, and Marcus is determined to wait him out. George finally agrees to give Marcus a reading. He takes his hands. He was young when he died, a boy. This was your brother. He says there's so much he wants to tell you. You wouldn't believe how it is, how you can be all things, all at once. And the weightlessness, he says that's cool. He says how you always looked up to him and relied on him to make the decisions, how maybe you used that as an excuse. You can't do that anymore. You're on your own now. He's saying something about a hat. He says to take it off. He's telling you not to wear it again because it was his, and that's why he knocked it off your head that day on the subway? Do you know what he's talking about? He says good thing he did, too, and it's the last time he's ever looking out for you. But he says if you're worried about being on your own, don't be. You're not alone, because he is you, and you are him. One cell, one person, always. He's leaving now. I'm sorry. Where's he gone? I'm sorry, kid, I don't know. But you've done all those readings. I still don't know. George is a medium, but he doesn't have all the answers. But what he gives Marcus is the closure he needs to begin to heal. Marcus calls George the next day to tell him that the woman he likes is staying at the Mayfair Hotel. I rang up the publisher and said that I heard her speak. I told them I wanted to drop off a letter saying how interesting it was. Anyway, that's the name of the hotel, the Mayfair. All his life, George has put up a wall between himself and other people, keeping everyone at a safe distance. But with everything that's happened, he decides to open himself up to life's possibilities in a way he never has before. He meets with Marie as if they were somehow destined to. For the first time in his life, he glimpses a vision of a positive future, a life that isn't all about death, one where he doesn't have to hide his past, his gifts, or who he is, one where he can truly be alive. There's a double meaning in the word hereafter because while it means life after death, the hereafter also means from now on. This story isn't just about death and the afterlife. It's about where we go from here, how we carry on with life from this point forward. We grieve. We never forget the ones we love, and even still, we find a way to keep going in spite of that loss, knowing that our loved ones always want our best and highest good, to find joy and happiness even if it's without them, even when we think they're gone. I've found that if you pay attention to the signs, you will find synchronicity at life's most crucial turning points. It's how we help each other let go of the past, to step out of our stagnation so we can continue to grow, even as we heal. Early on in the film, George says that his gifts are ruining any chance he has at living an ordinary life. But the truth is, he was never meant to live an ordinary life. None of us are. Because our deepest fear isn't that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. We are all meant to shine, as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. And as we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Even the most ordinary life is an astonishing miracle. Earlier, I mentioned that near-death experiences are some of the most compelling pieces of evidence we have for the afterlife. In my deep dive video on that, I look at research from one of the leading experts in this area, Dr. Bruce Grayson. He goes through some amazing stories from people who've gone to the brink of dying and came back to describe the incredible things they saw. You can watch it now by clicking on the video on the right side of your screen. His explanation of the filter theory of the brain totally changed how I think about consciousness and near-death experiences. As always, thanks so much for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.